Hi, storytellers, and welcome back to the Storyteller Shelf podcast. It's Jackie here with Teresa, and we have another special guest with us today. Today, we have Ellen Potter, and she is a well respected, award winning author of over 25 books and a book coach and editor. So, as usual, Ellen, we are going to jump right into it. Can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
So, I grew up in New York City, started writing as a kid. I went to college, studied creative writing at college. After I graduated, I intended to write for adults. So, after I graduated, I started writing short stories. I got several published in literary magazines. Then I decided I was going to write a novel for adults. And I got into probably it was like halfway through the novel. It was going great. And then I got stuck, like majorly stuck. It was the first time I'd hit a wall like that in writing because I had never tried to write a long piece like that. I told myself I was going to give myself a week off and then I'd get back to it after I kind of mulled things over. And then a week came and I didn't have the courage really to get back to it. So I said, I'm going to give myself another week. And the weeks turned into months and the months turned into a year. And then it was going on and on. So I had it felt like such a burden. I was carrying around this unfinished piece of work that I didn't know how to get back into. So at the time, I was waiting tables. I was doing all kinds of odd jobs to support myself as a writer. I was a dog groomer. I worked in construction and I was a receptionist and I waited a lot of tables. So I was waiting tables at this Thai restaurant and they were looking for a new wait staff. They interviewed a bunch of people and this woman came in, young woman, in her 20s. She had these like cat eye glasses and piercings and she was all tatted up and she looked interesting. So we started talking and it turned out that she also had started a novel, same as me, got halfway through and was stuck. So we made a pact and we told each other we were going to email each other a page of writing every day, 7 days a week until we finished our books. And we actually wrote out a contract, signed it, rolled it up, put it in a bottle. This is probably not cool anymore or wasn't at the time. And we threw the bottle in Cayuga Lake. And so then we emailed each other every single day, a piece of writing. Really, we were really held each other accountable. The writing at first was horrible. It was like not usable. But because we had each other at the other end waiting for that piece of writing, we just kept going. And after a while, the writing got better and we started getting back into our books and our characters they populated the restaurant with us in a way because while we were, rolling silverware or, you know, filling salt and pepper shakers, we were talking about our characters as if they were real people. And so our books became alive and we were making a lot of progress. So there's one night where usually I wrote during the day and I would send her my page, but I didn't. I missed the day, I missed writing during the day, and then I had my evening shift. And when I got home, I was so tired, and I thought, it's one day. She's probably not even going to miss it. And I went to bed, and at midnight, she knocked on my door and demanded the page. So I had to get up with her sitting there and write out my page. And so we were so good about holding each other accountable that we finished our novels, each one of us, within 6 months of starting this pact with each other when we had been really struggling with both our novels for a long time. We both finished our books. And at that point, I started to look for an agent. Very luckily, I found a fantastic agent. And she started to shop my novel around. In the meantime, it was such a hard thing to do to write this novel for adults. I mean, it was the first novel I'd written, so I really didn't quite know what I was doing. So for fun, I said, you know what? I'm just going to write a kid's book just for fun. It was almost like a game. And I wrote this book called Olivia Kidney. I wrote it in 3 months. The book was taken instantly by Penguin. It was, I think, the second publisher it went to, yep. And then both my books, the book for adults and the book for kids, were published within 3 days of each other when it had been years of me struggling to get anything published. So it was a huge deal. The contracts started to come for the kids' books. So I followed the contracts and I'm so glad I went in that direction. You never know where life it sends you in all different directions. So it sent me down the kid route and I feel like that was just a real blessing because it's just been great and so much fun.
Ellen, there's like a million things that I want to say in response to all of that goodness. Where do I even begin? I don't know. But first thing, it's so relatable what you mentioned. You get intimidated by yourself and your own thoughts and the writing process. I think that's so normal. And even though we talk about things like writer's block pretty publicly, I sometimes feel like there's never quite enough support in saying, yeah, but you're scaring yourself. So let's instead take that and find a plan for us to continue. Not just motivational quote and get back on it. Like some people need a little extra support. And I love that your support came from finding some community and someone who loved and wanted to do the same thing as you. And you made that pact and threw it in a bottle into the lake. This is perfect. I mean, not everybody might have the bottle in the lake part, but we can pretty much work with the rest, I think.
That is an early lesson that I've carried forward, and it's something that I always tell the writers I work with as well. The accountability thing is huge. Now I'm accountable to my agent, I'm accountable to my editor, so I know I have to hit my deadlines. But when you don't have that, writing can be very difficult. So I always tell people get a partner, someone who's going to really either another writer or maybe someone who's not writing and have someone at the other end waiting for your work because that's how you get through it. That's how when the writing isn't going well, but someone's waiting to read what you have, that's how you keep going. Yeah, there's a lot of strategies. I do I do a lot of book signings and writing workshops and it's astonishing to me how many people have started books or have an idea for a book, really great ideas, but they either have gotten stuck or they can't even get to the starting point. And there's just different tools and strategies that you can use to get past that. Getting stuck, I tell this to writers, I tell this to the kids that I work with too. It's part of the writing process. You just do. You get stuck and it's a very uncomfortable feeling. In most things that we do, we get to proficiency by doing it a lot. But in writing, it's a little bit different. Every new book is a new challenge. Every time I sit down to write a new book, there's a part of me that's wondering, can I do it? Can I do it? Because you're stepping into a brand new world every time you start a new book. And it's very scary. But again, there are different, I don't want to say tricks, but different strategies to navigate around self-doubt and get yourself into the book or the story, whatever you're writing.
I kind of like the word trick because I accept the little magic in the science behind the strategy. Oh my gosh. Yeah, everything you said really resonates with me. And I don't consider myself an expert writer at all. In fact, I always say I'm really new to the craft. And I have experienced everything that you mentioned. I definitely have been sitting and sleeping on ideas for books, maybe for years. And I don't feel embarrassed saying that now because Ellen is good company.
Yeah, I mean, it's so common to have these ideas and it's scary. It's a scary thing to do, I think. So you need all the tricks and the support that you can get.
I definitely agree. I agree with you. And we're going to kind of talk a little bit strategy next. So, Ellen, you've written for more than one age level. I mean, you just mentioned an adult novel and a children's book, but you've also written things like chapter books and middle grade books. So, could you tell us a little more about how you approach storytelling for someone of one age versus the other, particularly with kids? So, let's think of like a 6-year old versus a 10-year-old.
Yeah, that's a tough question. Weirdly enough, having written for such a broad age range up to adults. The actual writing, the process is very similar for me. Whether you're writing for a 6-year-old or a 60-year-old, that have to be in place in order to create a story that works, that resonates, right? So you need, your strong characters. The story has to feel tight. There needs to be the forward motion. So all the pieces are there. So, there are nuances with the age groups. So of course, language and content are going to shift slightly. You can get into more complexity with a slightly older age group, but even there, chapter books, middle grade books, they kind of melt a little bit into each other, which is not a bad thing. In fact, sometimes I don't really love those designations because there are older readers who aren't comfortable with like a typical middle grade book, and they'll gravitate more toward a chapter book that's maybe a little maybe upper level. It goes both ways. When I'm writing for the young kids, obviously shorter chapters, simpler language. I'm very cognizant, although I feel like this also goes with middle grade too, of you want to keep the action going. You just don't want to lose them. So every chapter just pushes the story forward, maybe a little bit in an accelerated way for younger kids and for older kids. There's a little bit more of a room for reading in depth and maybe slowing it down for middle grade a bit. But even then, I feel like there's been a shift in reading that I've seen since I've started writing. The older kids they're wanting those shorter books. And they don't have as much, I don't know, like there's not they're not reaching for those big fat books mostly. I mean, there are always readers that will, but they want a shorter book, but a book that has some meat to it, Not so that's the tricky part is writing slightly shorter books for maybe middle grade, but bringing in the depth into the books, the complexity in the storyline within a shorter format, I'd say. But apart from, the age groups, whether you're writing chapter books or writing for adults, it always starts with character. That's number one. That goes across the board. And the characters have to feel alive. They have to feel like they're capable and are making decisions throughout. I don't plot very much. Everybody has a different approach and there's no right or wrong. It's just whatever feels comfortable for you. But my entrance into a story is always through character. So I put a lot of focus on my characters before I even start writing. Not a lot of focus on mapping anything out or plotting anything out. For me, the joy of writing is the discovery. Things your character does that you might not have anticipated, twists and turns. And the only way I can do that, everyone has different skill sets within. The only way I can do that is to get to know my character really, really well and then set them on their way. And I'm following behind to see what they're doing. And of course, there's management. You're putting challenges in front of them, but I always think of this like one of my dogs, I can't remember which one, I've had a lot of dogs. I had the dog in the vet and the vet needed to examine my dog, and I was kind of gripping him, and the vet said, "No, Ellen, it's like that song, 'Hold on loosely, but don't let go.'" So, like, you just gotta, and that's how it is with the characters too, I feel like. You're holding on to them, but loosely, and you're also letting them have their own agency. It's a weird process, but I think a lot of writers see that when their stories are very character driven and when they're very invested in their characters, the characters, again, talk about magic, they kind of magically start taking on a life of their own and they start making decisions that you had not even anticipated. So I do that anyway. That's a character is first and foremost with any age group.
Honestly, we'd like to talk more about character building because character development can be a pretty hard thing to do. Sometimes people just have a plot idea and they know where they want to get, but they don't really focus on the characters. And then halfway through the book, I've seen people pause and say, something about this is missing, something doesn't feel right. And it's usually going back to developing a layered character. So, can you share a little bit more of those strategies that you use to help build those characters?
Um, it's super simple, and this is something I do, and I tell adults this, and kids get this real easily, and adults are like, "Well, that's kinda weird." But I interview my characters. I just pretend they're sitting across from me. I start asking them questions, and I listen, and sometimes you can hear their voice coming through. It takes a little bit, and I just try and get to know as much as I can about them. Mostly, what I wanna know is what they want and what they need. Like, those are the 2 big things. If you A lot of times I find that once I start writing, those needs and those wants might shift a little. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they stay where they are, but often they'll shift. And I do, of course, learn a lot more about my character as I'm writing the story. But I like to start with a little bit of a feel for them. Um, they have to feel like they're right in front of me, and they're telling me things about themselves. They have to feel real. I mean, that's basically it. I always explain to because a lot of writers have great ideas for plot, storyline, and they launch in like you're saying, and they don't have their character in place. So, like, one thing I tell kids is that it's sort of like when you're building, like, a gingerbread house. Everybody wants to decorate it. Everyone wants to get the candy on there because that's the fun part. But the actual structure of it, cutting it, baking it properly, putting all the pieces together, that's the part of that, and without that, the gingerbread house is gonna completely crumble. So the same with the characters. You need to get that initial introduction to your characters in order to have a scaffolding for your story. Otherwise, no one cares. I mean, I think about, um, like, The Office. There you have nothing is not just going on really, but you have these incredible characters that are supporting these very, very minor, soft stories. And it's completely compelling because of the characters. And it's everything. It's everything in with any age group.
Let's say that we have our characters. We did our character interview. We have a good sense of how they look and how they act and what their attitude is and what their goals are. What would you tell someone who has done all their homework and they have one plot written already, but they know they want to make a series next?
I would say, of course, obviously, you're writing if you're thinking series, you write that first book because there are gonna be surprises in that first book that you won't be able to see until it's done, and then you can work on book 2, book 3. So, when I write a series, sometimes I have a vague idea of where I want the next few books to go. Invariably, it's not going there. There's a because the plotting, I find, for me anyway, it kind of stymies the process. It's kind of like when when you wake up in the morning, right? You have an idea about how your day is gonna go. You know the parameters. You get up, you brush your teeth, you take a shower, you go to work, this time, this time, this time. But throughout the day, surprising things happen that can reroute you. So I think in the same thing, like with a series or with a book, you can have a general idea of where you want a story to go, but you also want to be loose enough to get rerouted. The great thing about series, though, which is one of the things I really love, is with each book, you're getting to know the characters a little bit better. And they change, like they do change. Sometimes they become more of what they are, sometimes they kind of nudge in one way or the other way. But it's really fun to write a series because as you feel like the characters are growing and becoming more real, your readers are too. That's why everyone loves series. They get connected to characters, and we as writers do as well. So I wrote this series called Piper Green and the Fairy Tree, right? And in this series, this little girl who grows up on an island in Maine has a fairy tree in her front yard. And the fairy tree, you have to leave something in a hole in the tree, and then the fairies will leave something that you need in it for you when to take it out. And so each time I wrote that a new book, I never knew what was going to be in the tree. And so that once I figured out, I would kind of like maybe get an image of something that I was going to place in the tree, and then that that item inform the whole book and what happens in the book. So sometimes it can be like that. There can be an item that is going to shift everything, or it can be a new character that comes into a series that maybe makes things go a little sideways, and so that your main character is tested in certain ways. There's a lot of ways to challenge your characters, and I think that happens in series with each book. But I would say not to get too attached to any idea for a long series because you don't know where that first book is going to go.
I love the exploratory approach where the first step is really just writing. First page, first chapter, next chapter, first book. See what happens. Then come back and start your planning. I think a lot of us get really overwhelmed because we know in our head, okay, want to write a 10-part series. It's going to have this and it's going to have this, but it's better to allow yourself some grace and freedom. Like you said, Ellen, to just find the characters and the surprises along the way that will propel you much more easily, right, into the next book. Because, like you said, if you're writing something down and it changes, you might get that residual panic when you go to the next book because you weren't sticking to script before, but that's okay.
Are you an author, illustrator, or educator looking to better understand the world of children's publishing? Join us, the Storyteller Summit, a week-long masterclass happening January the 12th through the 17th. Each day offers focused sessions on kidlit storytelling, craft, and the business side of publishing, created to support you wherever you are in your journey. The summit concludes with a literary pitch event featuring Saron Harvey of the Bellcaster Literary Agency. Learn more and reserve your spot at thestorytellershelfpodcast.com.
It's true, and that's the fun of it, really. I mean, isn't that the fun of writing? Kids know that when I work with kids, especially like 6th grade and under, kids get that 100%. This is the fun of it. What happens next? I can think of anything. When it's too scripted, it's boring. It's boring for them, it's boring for adults, it's boring for your readers. So I find that maybe not knowing exactly what's going to happen next can be sometimes a little unnerving, but it's also really satisfying when you just like this thing comes out of nowhere and you know, oh yeah, that would be amazing, or my character would do this in this situation. I know they would, and then you throw it at them and see what happens. Yeah. It's that's an exciting way to write, I think.
And I think this is wonderful advice for aspiring writers, though, working on their first children's book. How do they know if they're writing a picture book, a chapter book, or a middle grade? And what should guide that decision?
A picture book is definitely its own thing, and you will know if you're writing a picture book because, well, for one thing, obviously, you're gonna rely on pieces of it being told by images, but it's got a very tight mechanics. Chapter book and middle grade, it can get a little fuzzy. They kind of bleed into each other. I hear the voice of the character sometimes, and that can inform, well, how old is this kid really? And sometimes also it's a matter of like thinking about who you're writing it for. Like if you have a specific, even a specific kid in mind that you're writing it for, so you can kind of aim for that those sensibilities of me, you know what, like if it's a 9-year-old or a 6-year-old. Sometimes you don't know until you start writing, and that's definitely happened to me. I think maybe it's slightly younger, and then as you're writing, it goes older, and that's okay. It's a hard lesson for all of us to not worry about where it's going, what how it's going to shape up until we're actually in there and we see who is this going to appeal to. And it does take shape as you're writing. I mean, I'm trying to think if I've had recently you can start off writing for a younger audience, but there's story itself demands more complexity than what maybe a 6-year-old would want. So then you start nudging up both in language and the ages of the characters older. It doesn't usually go the other way. It doesn't go younger for me anyway. It's usually when I've veered into an older chapter book or older or to middle grade, it's that I started younger and I just couldn't do what I wanted to do with the story and keep it simple. So one of the things that I did struggle with, I started off writing for middle grade almost exclusively. And then when my son was younger, as a mom, it's a pull. And middle grade books are a hair's breadth away from writing for adults. Quite honestly, the intensity and the rigor, it's very similar. So I said, okay, I'm going to write a chapter book, and I think I can write it faster and slightly easier. Again, it really does require the same amount of rigor, but it's shorter. I remember that I had to fight putting in more story threads, because that was my go-to for middle grade. I'd have lots of story threads and then, weave them together by the end. But I did have to I had to get a little more simple for the younger ages. So that's something to consider. What does your story need in order to be told the way you want to tell it? And if it's too complicated, nudge it up in age. Yeah, nudge it maybe to middle grade.
I agree because anecdote time. I was thinking recently, I wrote a picture book and then I shared it with Jackie. And then she said, I think this would be really great as a chapter book versus a picture book. So have you ever had that instance where you start off with a picture book and then you have to grow into a chapter book? And then you mentioned how to make the language fit based on who the reader is. So how do you go from 4 8-year-olds to older into 6 to 10 years of age?
It is a leap. One thing that really does help is I do a lot of school visits, especially now. The schools like to kind of clump up a lot of age groups. So I might do a school visit where I'm talking to kindergarten through fifth grade. Not always ideal, but interesting. So when you're around kids of different ages, then you get a feel for where your story is going to land. You can get a feel for that particular audience a little bit better. I've never written a picture book, but I can see how you could write a picture book and realize, oh no, this is probably a better fit for a chapter book. Again, there's some blurred lines in some of these designations, nudge any of them in one direction or another at certain points. So, and sometimes it's just a matter of you're writing something and you're thinking, oh, this would be so much more fun to write for older kids. Then you might not feel as constrained if you wrote for older kids. But yeah, hanging out with kids is very helpful. You get their voices in your ear.
Yes, I see that because I'm a mom as well. So that kind of helps. Though mine are in that sort of early teenage years. So it's kind of like, okay, now my brain has shifted into that category. So I think it also, like you said, going to those school visits will help you as well to be a better writer, writing into the different age groups and genres, etc. Let's say someone is working on a manuscript and they think it's ready to submit. They're like, okay, this looks amazing. I've already done my beta tests, I've done my art groups, all of those things. What questions should they ask themselves, or what steps should they take before querying an agent or an editor?
It's the same things that a polished professional writer would ask themselves when before you submit. Does it hang together? Are there any holes in the plot? It's really important to have a strong beginning. I worked as an editor for years while I was writing. And so I remember being an editor who I would read the slush pile. And I was so determined when I first got in that job that I was going to read every manuscript, because I knew like how difficult it was to even get read in a publishing company, especially if you didn't have an agent. So I said, I'm going to read every single manuscript. So my pile, which started like that, within a week's, it was like that. And I couldn't keep up. And so what I realized is I was going to have to just read a few pages in order to make a decision, which is basically what all the editors do. So you really have to grab that editor like that. So whether through an agent or an editor where they want to see more and you send 3 chapters, a lot of times they're not even going to get to finish those 3 chapters if they're not completely immersed in the first page or so. So you need a real fantastic opening to grab the reader in. Yeah, that's what I would say. It's a little tricky. I have my own ideas about having lots of people read your work before. You have to be very, very choosy about who reads your manuscript your beta readers. Because what I've seen on the coaching side of things, I get manuscripts that people say, "Oh, I had 10, 15 people reading my manuscript giving me feedback." And when I get the manuscript, it's like a Frankenstory. It often is just a mess, and the original seed of what this story was supposed to be is just gone. So I always tell people, just be a little careful about giving it out to everybody, and then reworking when you're getting all these different opinions. That's often not a great way to finish up a manuscript. That happens a lot.
That's a really good point because Teresa and I, we have had our own experiences with critique groups and hearing from other people what their experiences were with critique groups. And it's very this way or that way. Either they had a great experience and they got what they felt was very good advice, or it was a complete loss. Like, they went in there and it wasn't just that it wasn't constructive criticism, but maybe those people weren't familiar with that genre or what that age group is required to have when it comes to writing a book. And they got bad advice, which they noticed later on when they went to take the next steps.
Exactly. Yeah, I would be very, very choosy about who you give the manuscript to. I usually only give it to one or two other people, other writers who I really trust, who are really immersed in the children's book industry. Other than that, I don't share it around widely beforehand.
That's good advice. I'd love to jump off of what you just said, ask the hard question. Do you have any tips when it comes to getting a literary agent?
I mean, it's tough. It's tough out there. I know. It's very competitive. I mean, it's the same advice I would say if you're sending in, obviously, just to a publishing house straight ed, is make sure the manuscript is very, very polished. Research the agents to see if it's really a fit. Don't waste their time. Don't waste your time, because you can wait quite a long time to get a response from agents. So, but after you've researched and you know exactly how to write a query letter that's effective, send it out. And what I always tell people, whether they're sending it out to an agent or a publishing house, start writing another story or another book while you're waiting, because if you're sitting there and focusing and waiting for a response, you're going to make yourself nuts. It's much healthier to just launch yourself into another project. And so then you take the weight off of that first project and you get excited about the next project. Every project you're writing is going to get better and better. Just keep moving and know that the rejections, you don't know why they're rejecting you. It could be they're inundated, they're not taking any more clients, they just took a book that was similar. Like, it could be anything at all. One thing I do say, and this is something I early on I did, like, if I got 3 pieces of advice or suggestions from different agents or editors, if a manuscript is going around, then I'd take it seriously, because there's 3 different people who took the time. They don't always take the time to give you, any suggestions. They usually don't. They took the time to suggest something. These are people that generally know their business, and then I would really take it seriously and decide if I needed to revise a manuscript. So that's just another thing to consider.
As a book coach, do you ever help people in developing that query and that pitch to send off to either the publishing houses that accept unsolicited manuscripts or the agents?
Yeah, I mean, that's not every writer wants that, but when they do, I always do help them with it. Yeah.
Can you do a little breakdown for us of what should go in it and what we should not miss?
Well, I mean, making sure that you research the agent you're going for. And it's nice to refer to some of the books that they've agented so they know that you have a vested interest in them. Of course, they're the comps. Make sure they're comps that make sense. But mostly, you want them to understand why this book is going to reach people, touch people. If it's for, kids' books, like, what is it about your book that is just speaking to something kids are just obsessed with? Basically, you just want them to know, like, that they can sell this book. Like, this is something that if they take on, it's going to be viable for them to sell. So it just kind of, the query letters are pretty short, but they have to be very to the, because you don't have a lot to work with, but to the point, and making the agent feel like, okay, this project is actually has a lot of potential. It's something I'm excited to get behind. If there's something about your particular background that really speaks to the book, go into it. If not, you don't need to spend a lot of time talking about, the things you've done before if it's not super relevant. You just basically want them to get excited about the work.
That was a beautiful formula. Thank you. And you said it so happily. Sometimes when we have this discussion, you can see the stress on everyone's face. Like, please include this, please include this. And like, wait, remember to have some fun.
That's the spirit. I mean, they see so many queries. You just want to think about what you would be excited about to read, and often it can translate. And again, you and when if and when I mean when, because you will get rejections, don't take it personally. It's just you gotta kind of thicken up the skin, and that happens pretty quickly. But a great agent, I love my agent. I mean, I've definitely heard horror stories about agents. So there's a lot of them out there that are not terrific. I would say that if you get an agent who's interested in you, you can interview them. The feeling a lot of writers have is, oh, I'm so lucky I got this agent, but you also don't want to tie yourself to someone who's not going to be doing the work for you. I think it's a really good idea to talk to them to see, if the vibe is right, if you feel like this is going to be a good fit. And if it's not, it's probably better not to go with them because you can get yourself into a situation where they're sitting on your work, they're not sending it out. But when you get a great agent, it's just fantastic. Like, they know how to obviously, they know how to negotiate for you. Foreign rights, something I would have no idea how to do that on my own. They're working on foreign rights, and it's also someone who has your back. Like, they're there to advocate for you.
We've seen good, we've seen bad, we've seen bad fits, not necessarily good or bad on anyone's side. But thank you for reiterating that because this is a business at the end of the day. But business comes with a professional relationship. And you have to make sure from your end that you're comfortable working with the people that you're working with. It's hard. It's hard.
You can go with your gut, and if something's red flagging you, take it seriously. Exactly. It never works out to work with someone who's not giving you a good feel.
Do you think it's essential to have an agent in today's children's publishing landscape? And how can authors find one who aligns with their vision?
There are people that go it alone. I think it's very difficult. I always tell my clients if they can, try and get an agent. I mean, they're just going to know how to do things that you don't know. If it's a good agent, they know a lot of the editors, they have relationships with them. They know what the editors are looking for, what they want, and having that liaison is so crucial to getting your foot in the door. Also, they can kind of protect you from they can if you're getting lots of rejections. Some writers, I like to know the rejections just because I just want to know what they are. But it can really squash a lot of writers' spirits. So sometimes the agents just say, "Oh, we're just going to keep going." They keep it really positive. They kind of buffer you against rejection sometimes, and also negotiations. Like, I don't know how to negotiate. I would be a terrible negotiator, terrible. And my agent's fearless, and she'll just go in on my behalf and negotiate things that I never would have thought to ask for. So, yeah, you can do it without an agent, but I feel like there's a lot of traps that writers can fall into that really are upset me. Like when I hear about different publishing situations that some writers have experienced that's just awful and abusive, and a good agent will make sure that you're treated the way you should be treated. But again, like, it's good to actually get an agent whose agent is someone so that if they're okay, and if they're going to treat you well. But uh, yeah, I'm all for getting an agent. I think it's a good thing.
You've been writing books for a while and you've been helping so many people achieve their goals of writing books. And you've worked in the business. So you've seen this from all angles. What are the most significant changes that you noticed in the last few years when it comes to children's publishing?
Yeah, there's been a lot actually. The one that I think many people is it's more front and center is there's a lot more diversity in books now. That's really been a big push, which is great. And then there are other things just within the industry like when I first started, I don't think that editors were jumping around between houses as much as they are now. So, like, a lot of times now, you may start with an editor, and next year the editor will be at a different house. There so seems to be a lot of house hopping, which is fine. I mean, I've actually hopped around to different houses too. You may not be with the same editor for multiple books. Another big change is the marketing piece. Like, when I first started, the publishing house really did the bulk of the marketing. And now it's not like that anymore, which is good and bad. I mean, once you adjust to it, you realize that it gives you a lot more power over getting the word out about your book. You have to get a little up to speed on how to do it, and that's okay. So having a presence, social media presence, knowing how to like reach out, even to schools, like school visits actually are I think one of the best ways for writers to get their book well known, and it's a very satisfying thing to I love doing school visits. It used to be that a lot of times that would be the publishing house might help you with that, but now it's more writers themselves have to go out and set things up. It's more work on the other end for the writer, and some writers were typically we're not performers, we're not extroverts a lot of times. So that leap from being a writer to doing your own marketing can be a little difficult for writers, but kind of necessary now. Like, that really is where it's at. You know, you really do have to do the bulk of your own marketing, I would say. Now that's a big change.
Honestly, I hear what you're saying because I actually appreciate it because I've done a lot of vendor events, and that's something that I think writers need to also do as well. And you mentioned school events. I mean, that's one other thing. But which one would be better? Vendor event or school event?
I really like going into the schools. For one thing, you often have like a big group of kids that you're working with. So that's really fun. And so what I like to do is I like to do a presentation, then I like to do small group writing workshops with the kids. When I see kids get into writing their own stories and they get so excited about it, and then this happens all the time, is like after I do a writing workshop, the teacher will come up to me and say, "Oh, this kid, I couldn't get him to pick up a pencil and write a sentence, and now he just doesn't even want to stop writing a story." Love that. Like and it happens all the time because the kids really aren't given many opportunities to get creative like that, and they you can see like they need it. So it's very impactful. And sometimes, I mean, I do, of course, I'm going there partially. You know, you want to promote a book, but once you're there, you almost forget that that's what you're doing because it's so exciting to work with the kids and see their reading and writing was so boring to them. They're just so excited about it now. I love it. The other thing that writers are doing, this is, you know, a newer thing, and obviously pre-orders are really important. Now that's another change. Like that's like the big thing is pre-orders. So one thing that writers can do, and I did this for this last book, um, some schools can't really afford school visits, right? Their budget's totally blown for the year. So you can say, "Hey, I'll do either like a free visit or a visit at a reduced price, and as long as you pre-order a minimum number of books." And then that's spread among the parents who are buying the books for the kids. Usually the schools are really happy to do that, and the pre-orders are great because, you know, they bump up everything. They bump up your numbers. Long run, they'll likely bump up your next advance because your numbers are better. And then you get into more schools. Like I think the more schools, the better. I don't love social media. I have a hard time like toot my own horn. It feels really awkward to me, so I avoid it. But when you go into the schools, for me anyway, it feels like this is like a service. Like it's, yeah, I'm promoting, but it's promoting couched in service, which feels good to me. Like I can do that. And yeah, you reach a lot of kids that way. I think it's great.
Wow, thank you for that. I love that because you're getting to know your fans, so to speak, and also you're engaging. And I agree with you. Like I think as writers, we typically are we're not extroverts. We're more introverted. And it's ironic that nowadays the introverted type of people that writing seems to attract, we're having to be semi extroverted or ambiverted in a sense. So I agree with you. I think we we all three of us could agree on that I think we prefer to go out and provide a service in a sense of learning and growing and getting to know our fans in that same sense. I think we appreciate that more because we're giving back more so. I like that. I really like that. With that being said, though, if our listeners could only take one action, one piece of advice after hearing this episode, what would you want that to be?
This episode of the Storyteller Shelf podcast is brought to you by Harney and Sons Fine Teas, a perfect companion to every story. Whether you're reading, writing, or just enjoying a quiet moment to yourself, Harney and Sons offers a beautiful selection of teas to elevate this experience. From classic blends to unique finds, every cup is crafted with care, just like the stories we love to share. Shop harney.com/discount/storyteller, and Storyteller is in all caps. Now let's get back to the show.
I would say, as far as writing goes, when I went to college and studied writing, which was an interesting choice. A lot of people don't do that. That was my major. Um, the one thing that my professors told me is you need to write every single day, which I thought was ridiculous at the time. I was like, well, if I'm writing like hours one day, I surely can take a day off and then pick it up and write, next week or what. But no, writing every day is the key. And this is why I think it is. Because this is one way a lot of people get stuck. It's the way I got stuck for that first novel is when you stay away from a piece of writing for too long, it's hard to get back. And I always say it's kind of like when you write a book, you're creating a room, maybe in your house, right? And every time you sit down to write, you're walking into that room. Those are where all your people are. It's where all the action is. Then every day that you don't go into that room, the door starts to close. And so you may maybe you stay away from writing for like 2 days, 3 days, and then that door is closed a little bit more. And if you stay away long enough, the door is going to shut. And it's going to be really hard for you to get back into that room. It's going to feel really awkward and writing itself is difficult enough, so if you can't get back into the story, it's gonna prolong that feeling of being stuck or hitting a wall. So that's why I say it's really important to work on something every day, even if it's just like 10 minutes, and that's my goal. Like, it's my golden 10-minute thing because I do this with myself all the time. When I'm feeling, like, nervous about a story or when I first start a story, I set my timer for 10 minutes. And I say, Ellen, you're just going to write for 10 minutes. Like, you can do anything for 10 minutes. I think a typical shower is 10 minutes long, right? 10 minutes, right? I set the timer. And so it's doable. It's like it's a chunk of time that I can handle. I'll go in, I'll write for 10 minutes, and then I'm done. Often what happens is I get so excited, like I want to write more. Once you're in it, once you're in that room and you're in that world, you kind of want to stay there longer. So you might stretch the time out. But again, I guess my one thing would be like write every day. Work on that piece every day, even if it's just 10 minutes. Like you don't need, I think a lot of people, especially if they're working full time or they have a family, they're like, I don't have the time to do this. You don't need hours and hours of time to write your book. You can, if you're consistent, you can finish a book just by taking small chunks of time each day and working on it, because what happens is when you're not physically writing, you're thinking about it. So every time you sit back down to write, you've got ideas that are just like, trying to just jump out of your brain onto the page. So you're actually much more productive than you think you are. So that's my one thing.
That was one thing so wonderfully said. And we are at the point, Ellen, that we have to thank you so much for being here. and for being a great sport. Because storytellers, if you're listening, we sent Ellen some questions and then we made some questions on the fly. And she's been so awesome. She answered all of them with a smile. So please make sure you're looking on YouTube to see how friendly she is. And I think our storytellers are going to be taking notes as they listen to this. They might have a shopping trip planned so that they can buy themselves a cute timer to get writing every day. That's your homework, guys. And I also think several of them are going to find that one person to make a contract with and put it in a bottle and send it out so that they can be held accountable for their writing.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. You had the best question. You really made me think about things.
Thank you for watching the Storyteller Shelf podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss new insights from emerging authors, illustrators, and publishing professionals. Your support truly helps our show grow. And if you'd like to support us directly, visit our Ko-fi page and click Buy Me a Ko-fi. Thanks again for tuning in.